management. Then he got his also in real estate finance. So now he's just got his MBA. He's hoping, he's working on being the CFO of this new startup. So let's hope he gets there.
A lot of different options. Yeah.
Yeah, the company is like all over the world. But it's very fascinating.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Okay, we're going to get started. 12:06. Call the meeting to order. First thing we'll do is introductions. Why don't we start in the back? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Back row. Bill Kinship, County Treasurer.
Deputy County Administrator.
Eric Rock, Deputy County Administrator and Campus Manager. Dick Lee, County Administrator. Steve Benson, County Clerk.
Jody Birch, public member.
Kristen Tony, public member.
Patty Dare, District County Commissioner.
Phil Anderson, a public member to be, I think, effective in July.
Welcome aboard today. Like to have
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Daryl Parrish, public member.
Elizabeth Page, County Auditor.
Chuck Fadley, Justice of the Peace.
Aaron Kay, Performance Auditor.
Lee Randall, County Facilities Director and staff. Member.
Welcome, Lee. Two coming in. Just in time for introductions.
There's actually two seats.
There's a seat there and a seat here.
Also,
Yeah, I don't blame you. Anya, if you ordered lunch, it's back over there too as well.
Okay. Any?
and then there's
Oh,
Kevin and Amanda.
yeah, Kevin Interman from Moss Adams. Welcome.
Thank you.
See anyone else up there? Anyone else up there?
Oh, and Janet.
Janet, yeah. Janet, hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great to hear us okay?
Yeah.
Good. Any notices, anything to add to the agenda? It's not there. Okay. All right, we have the minutes from the March 8th meeting submitted for approval. Motion in a second to approve those, or any changes or questions or comments on them?
I move to approve the minutes of March 8th.
Motion made, Kristen, to approve.
I'll second.
90 seconds. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any issues? Okay, hearing none, we will move on. Special topics, internal audit plan for fiscal year 2024. That's Moss Adams.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. I think Kevin's going to pull up our presentation to go over our planning communications related to the fiscal year 2024 audit of the county's financial statements. While he's doing that, I can just do a quick introduction. I know you introduced us, but I'm Amanda McCleary Moore. I'm a partner with Moss Adams, and I work almost 100% with governmental entities such as the county. Thank you for having us here today. Kevin, I think you'd advance a couple slides.
There we are again.
Yep, here we are again. So this is by no means clearly everybody that works on the audit. We don't have our managers, staff, and seniors included on here. I introduced myself. My role as part of the audit is I'm the engagement reviewer. So I'm responsible for making sure that we follow all professional standards, that we meet your deadlines, and at the end of the audit, I sign your audit reports. Kevin's here with me as well, and he's considered your in charge or main point of contact during the audit. He manages our audit team as well as communications with your management during the audit. He also helps me with a lot of review of the audit documentation as well. Ashley Austin is another key member of the team. She's an audit partner as well that works on governmental entities. She is not otherwise associated with the day-to-day operations of the audit. She is what we consider an independent quality control reviewer. So she does some review of our planning at the beginning of the engagement, as well as reviewing your financial statements and our audit reports at the conclusion of the audit, just to have an independent outside perspective. And then while we don't have her on the screen, Michaela Mell is our senior in charge, and she's returning to the engagement as well. And she really handles really the day-to-day operations, working with the staff as well, and auditing the more complicated areas. We involve IT auditors as part of our process, as well as a number of staff, but just wanted to kind of highlight your team, which has been consistent since we've been working with you. So we're required to communicate with you twice. So we're communicating our planning communications today. So those hit those 2 bullet points there on the slide, our responsibility under the auditing standards, as well as some details about the scope of our audit, as well as the timeline on how that will how that will go forward through the end of the year, meeting your deadlines. At our exit meeting, which we typically have in early December, we'll go over all of our audit findings. We'll highlight some of the key items within your financial statement notes, and we disclose if we had any difficulties during the audit, or if there were any material errors that we identified and findings related to those. So those are all results of our audit, and we will go over those with you at the end of the audit in December. With that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, and he's going to walk us through more details related to those bullet points on that slide.
Thanks, Amanda. We want to make it clear what our responsibility as the county's external auditor. Really, our job is to issue an audit report on the financial statements. And in that report, we'll say if the financial statements are materially correct in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We'll do the audit in accordance with both generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards, which is issued by the Comptroller General of the U.S. And based on that, we'll design the audit to identify material misstatements in the county's financial statements. If we're able to do that, then we should be able to issue a clean audit opinion and unmodified audit report. But of course, there's no guarantees on that until we're through the audit. And then with the government auditing standards, we need to consider internal controls over financial reporting and compliance, and understand if there are controls in place. We'll plan our audit procedures under our understanding, and certainly this being our 3rd year now auditing the county, we already have a good understanding at the start of the engagement, and a lot of our work initially will be kind of kicking the tires to make sure our understanding and anything new that's been incorporated makes sense and is a part of our current year audit plan. And then, as Amanda said, at the end of the engagement, we're responsible to communicate significant matters to you, and as well as the audit results. Our audit process is really broken down into 2 stages. The first stage is considering your internal controls. This is where we'll perform risk assessment procedures over the county's key account balances. And when we see that procedures that we're carrying out there show us that internal controls are designed and operated, then we may look for additional audit efficiencies and test the operating effectiveness of your internal controls over a certain account balance. Expenditures are probably the best example, and where we most commonly find there are efficiencies gained there to get a lot of audit evidence. The second stage really happens after the county's closed its books and drafted its financial statements. That's where we'll either perform analytical procedures or test of details or substantive procedures over your year-end account balances. With the analytical procedures, we'll come up with an expectation on what we think the account balance should be, and if it's within a certain range, we can get good audit evidence there. If we find issues with our expectations, we'll have some more work to do, and that'll likely be the test of details. Those are kind of the traditional audit procedures you might think of looking at a big stack of invoices, though the county does have a good accounting system, so we're doing a lot of that within Munis. And then confirming account balances, with lenders, with depositories, things like that. So that's really all the types of testing we'll do in order to hopefully issue a clean opinion at the end of the engagement. Spoke about materiality being an important piece. We're looking for material misstatements in the financial statements. So how do we determine what's material? Well, we think about how a financial statement user could be misled if a material error is in the financial statements and what that amount might be. Amanda and I know Robert was there too, went to the GFOA conference in Orlando this past week. There were some good speakers there, and I heard a director from Moody's bond rating agency kind of talk about materiality a little bit from their perspective. And he said that Moody's is really focused with governmental funds looking at fund balance, and with enterprise funds looking at current net assets. So that is kind of interesting to hear what a really key financial statement user is looking at the financial statements. Ann and I might not necessarily use the same balances, but generally we're looking at things like your total assets, total expenditures, total revenue, and then applying a percentage to that in the neighborhood, I don't know, 2 to 5%, something like that. Now, there could be qualitative factors if there are certain covenants that could be the county could fail to meet if they don't meet something by a small dollar amount. We would consider that, but I think generally we're really using quantitative considerations when we consider what's material for the county. Want to let you know where we think the significant audit areas are for 2024's audit. We're certainly going to test all the key account balances in the financial statements, but these are probably the 4 where we're going to spend the most time. And that's largely because if something goes wrong in these areas, that's going to be an issue for all parties. So we want to make sure that we get things right here. Revenue recognition is always a critical piece to financial statement audits, and we'll put a lot of time into that. Things like your property taxes, your grants, other intergovernmental revenues, charges for services are what we're looking at there. Capital assets are probably the largest balance on your financial statements. And that's a common place where material misstatements can occur for governments in general. So that's a big focus. We'll focus on long-term debt, particularly bonds, because there's some key financial statement disclosures that users of the financial statements really like to focus in on. So we want to make sure that that's right. And then the compliance piece of the financial statement, which we haven't talked about too much, but that's your single audit flow. So your federal awards, making sure that the county's in compliance with the key requirements there. And then the Oregon minimum standards requirements. So the adoption and execution of your budget, your procurement process, how public deposits are held will be a big focus of the audit. So I think those are the key audit areas. We'll also consider fraud in the county's financial statements. And in particular, our job is to catch material fraud. So we'll do that by performing a number of procedures. At the start of the engagement, Amanda and I will get together with our whole audit team and think about last year's audit, what we know about the county over this past year, and think about a risk where a fraud may be able to fall through the cracks that's material and not be caught by the county's internal controls. And then we'll design some procedures that would hopefully identify if there is an issue in that regard. We're also going to reach out and talk to the county's team, because a tip is the most common way a fraud is going to be detected. We're only there a few weeks out of the year, and hopefully in our questioning of folks, they would feel comfortable letting us know if they see something that doesn't look right. If that's the case, we'll be sure to design audit procedures to verify if there's more things that need to be considered. We're also going to look at journal entries. I'm not going to read everything in here, but we'll design some journal entry testing to see if there are non-standard transactions that look like they require more attention on our part. So that's kind of how we're going to look for fraud. And then here's kind of the audit timeline for the county's FY24 audit. We'll be out on site the week of Labor Day to do that first stage, which is largely the risk assessment procedures and considering internal control. The county is expecting to have an initial draft of its financial statements done around October 14th, and that would be wonderful. That's an improvement on last year, and then last year's timing was good, so it's always great to see a step taken forward like that. And that's when we're going to be on site, or I shouldn't say that. That's when we're going to start our first week of testing the year-end balances on October 14th. The week after that, doing math, that's the 21st of October, we'll be on site. And then we think we'll need another week of wrap-up, so about 3 weeks there in October to complete our year-end testing. And then I think that'll put us in position to issue audit reports on November 22nd. That'd be a week ahead of last year's target when we issued reports on November 30th. And then December 6th, it looks like, is when the audit committee would be scheduled, where we can talk about audit results. Now, this timing isn't just for the county, it's also for all the component unit audits that the county is responsible for too. So we plan to issue all those audit reports on November 22nd. And I think Man is going to wrap it up with accounting and auditing developments update.
Yeah, after the past couple of years of having some significant accounting standards to implement with leases and SPIDAs, this year is a little bit on the lighter side. So the county will have one GASB statement to consider when drafting the financial statements this year, which is related to accounting changes and error corrections. So GASB 100 provides some guidance around if you have significant changes in accounting estimates, whether it's related to an accounting principle or how you estimated a balance and how that would be treated within the financial statements, as well as reporting error corrections related to errors included in prior year financial statements. So there may not be a lot, if anything, to change for you this year. The one thing that I did want to point out, and they actually talked a lot about this at the GFOA conference that Kevin mentioned that we attended this last week, is related to if you do have a change in your major funds. The standard also addresses how you do that. The GFOA referred to it as a ghost column. If you do have a change in major funds, I know you haven't in the past 2 years that we've worked with you had a change in major funds, but if you do in the current year when you put the financial statements together, there is some guidance on how that gets reported within the face of the financial statements as well as within your supplemental schedules. So a couple changes that could result in presentation in your financial statements related to that. So just a note to be aware of that in case that does apply in the current year.
And man, as you're saying that, I was thinking we could be seeing that in the next year or two with all the ARPA money being spent. It's common for counties to have a special revenue fund dedicated to ARPA that's major, and that's probably going to be going away.
Yeah, so good point. So if you do spend down your ARPA, I suspect your expenditures would still be potentially high enough to have that be reported as major. But yeah, it'll probably drop off if not this year, in the next couple of years, as that funding does get spent down. the last two bullet points on here are really just for us as auditors. We actually have two new auditing standards that we need to comply with this year. One is related to auditing accounting estimates and the disclosures related to that. So you may see some additional requests related to that, some additional inquiries, and it really applies to our documentation surrounding that. Clearly, the county has a number of estimates included within the financial statements that we'll have to consider under SAS 143. The next one, SAS 145, is really documentation for us related to understanding the county and the environment and assessing where we believe the risk of material misstatement could occur within the financial statements. This includes looking at inherent risks, which we haven't really had to assess in the past. And so another level of assessment there and determining how we will test your account balances in the current year. So a couple changes on our end that could relate into maybe a couple different requests or looking at something a little bit different, but we do need to incorporate some level of unpredictability in our financial statement audits each year. And so this will be a good way for us to do that in the current year. And with that, we just wanted to highlight a few of our resources. So at Moss Adams, we do provide a lot of content for our clients. There, you can sign up for these on the external mossadams.com website. The first one is just some articles and alerts. These are probably the most frequent and that come out and just highlight little articles about hot topics. We do put on a number of webcasts. We actually have a web series for all of our governmental clients, just an array of topics related to uniform guidance or the new GASB accounting standards that are out there. And so we do have webcasts over that. And then a lot of other related hot topics for governments. And then less common, but depending on how significant a new accounting standard is, we might have some reports or some guides out there to help you with implementation of those standards. These are all available on our external website. And if you want to get that information as it comes out, you can definitely sign up for those. We do typically will email management as well if we think that there's some topic that would be really key to them as well. So. And
Here's
then
our
with that,
contact information.
Yeah. And here's our contact information in case you have any follow-up questions for us. We're always available.
Stop sharing.
And with that, we can open it up to if you have any questions about our audit plan for this year.
Hey, Janet, did Janet have a question? I saw something light up on the screen.
I have a question too after Janet.
Oh, I was just noting that ARPA might drop off this year. I'm kind of waiting to see where it ends up. And then the campus improvement fund is going to be major for this year with the courthouse debt going into that fund. So
okay, so well, you'll have some GASB 100 considerations.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question was this morning I saw in the news that Wells Fargo had some employees that were working from home that actually weren't working. And they did some system, they were using their keyboard, but they really weren't. Do you look at anything like that, or is that something that internally we as Deschutes County have to make sure that people are working from home or actually working? These people
that's a good question and a very common question that I get. And yeah, I mean, it is tough, but it would be the county's responsibility to, make sure that those employees are working. So we expect as part of, your timekeeper that you have a supervisor and they're signing off on timesheets and should be aware of what duties and what deliverables that employee might need to provide as part of their work from home arrangement and can ask questions. I mean, it rather than just, signing off on timesheets, really making sure that time is accurate and that they're actually doing work is important. Very common question. It is a tough thing to get your arms around and make sure that employees are working when they say they are.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on that, Kevin?
Yes. Questions for Moss Adams while we have them on the line? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your work.
All right, it was good to see you all, although very
Yeah.
tiny, but we'll see you in person in the not too far future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to the next item, which are internal audit reports. The first one is custom software development.
Get my screen going here. Yeah. All right, so this audit came out of an identified risk area from the 2022 cybersecurity audit, where the county scored 29 out of 100 on inventory and control of software assets and 42 out of 100 on application security control. So, all software applications contain some level of risk. Security vulnerabilities, reliability, and or compatibility are kind of the top three. What makes custom developed software kind of a higher risk is because the county develops it, they own it, they maintain it. They're responsible for security, maintenance, and reliability solely. Whereas anything that's bought off the shelf, the vendor is basically responsible for ensuring the product is secure, it works as designed, and it's up to them to maintain it through updates. I want to thank Tanya and all her staff for being so accessible and honest, and also the other IT folks that aren't in the room from the sheriff's office, the district attorney's office, community development, road, and assessor's office. We all had some tough conversations, but I mean, overall, they all expressed the desire and the goal to just make the county better. So it's great working with you. So this was the development process diagram that I used to kind of inform the purpose of each phase of software development. Deficiencies at any point in any of these phases can really increase the risks with each application, whether it's poor planning or rush to development or neglected maintenance. The risks around security and integrity of those software applications increase. And of course, that would be also based on the complexity of the product. And then one of the background areas that I wanted to highlight is just this shift in staffing levels for IT employees around the county. The chart pretty clearly shows that central IT staffing has remained flat, while other departments have fulfilled their needs, their IT needs, through hiring additional staff. So it kind of exacerbated the federated structure that existed. Federation isn't unique within IT. State of Oregon actually operates in a federated system, but among the other Oregon counties that we looked at, it is rather unique. The structure's been in place for a long time. As you can see, the number of other department ITs never been at zero. They've always existed. It's just the transition where they're outnumbering now central IT. And so that structure kind of creates a little bit of risk. And especially when it comes to organizational cybersecurity, it's hard to keep control over all those other assets. Nope, back to this one. So we came up with 13 findings directed at county central IT as our experts and ultimately the department that bears the responsibility for IT risks. The findings I aligned with the diagram with each phase of the audit software diagram to show where improvements were identified. And so the resulting recommendation contains some repetitive language, but it's my judgment that this gave the department some flexibility in how they resolve the findings and the timing to resolve the findings. As Tanya indicated in her response, 2 of the policy recommendations were prioritized as urgent, while the others were kind of deferred until establishment of an advisory body. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, so we'll jump into where I saw some improvement. So in the planning and analysis phase, 3 risk areas were identified. Currently, development is is fairly uncoordinated across the organization. The federated structure is running very independently of each other with little formalized risk assessment, business case development, or evaluation of alternatives. Part of that evaluation should include a cost benefit analysis, but there's no methodology on how those internal software development costs are calculated. And historically, IT internal service fund charges were just based on workspaces and have never included any kind of back charges for department specific software development. And finally, there's no comprehensive list of the custom software of the county. Going back to the cybersecurity audit where the inventory score was fairly low. So responsibility for unknown products has been passed to central IT when other IT staff leave the county. Even when those central IT staff had no part in the development or the knowledge of the security profile. So the recommendations are to enact some best practices around planning, mainly by creating an advisory body of IT experts that would formalize a selection process. Also outline a methodology for calculating those costs for development and an annual reporting of applications around the county. When designing products, developers have not taken the extra step to document the design architecture of the products. This is mainly due to the emphasis on creating the products with limited resources. And I will acknowledge that there's an initial inefficiency by taking the time to record the information of the design. But when you think about the succession planning and long-term maintenance, having that information readily available and consistently documented makes those transitions much more efficient. So the squeeze is worth the juice and aligns with best practice. The county also uses Microsoft's framework for software development, leveraging that company's global resources to set security and privacy controls. But the county has not identified through policy the alignment with Microsoft or possibly more stringent data security and privacy controls. So coding, software programming languages are like any foreign language. I've personally been trying to learn Spanish for over 20 years. You can imagine as a developer, you get very familiar with one language and then you're asked to take over an application that is written in, say, Mandarin, right? That's tough. So coding standards are an important control in ensuring consistency in a development process and long-term maintenance. But only one developer in the county out of the 9 had written standards, but all of them informally followed best practices within the industry for coding. And most use the same language, but we had one application that was created with an alternative, but it's still a widely accepted language, coding language. So testing was based solely on developer judgment. There were no documented decision points on when or what level of testing should take place. Again, as project complexity increases, so should the level of testing. Independent code review is one way that testing can happen, but there was no documentation of informal code reviews or corrections from that feedback. Most of this largely occurred within central IT. The other developers around the county rarely had a second set of eyes look over their applications. And then just like versions and report writing, version control in software development tracks modifications to code. They provide a history of the changes and facilitate collaboration. A secure repository can manage this version control. And currently central IT staff have access to the county's secure repository, while federated staff, again, who outnumber central IT staff, use just local storage. So allowing federated staff to access a secure repository would enhance consistency in code management and increase potential for collaboration. Another documentation area developers were bypassing was documentation of the system. These are things like prerequisites, configuration, and release notes, also user manuals. Helpful, internal service level agreements or that type of a document. Identifies the who, what, why, when, how. That creates an understanding between the requester and the developer. Clarifying responsibilities when a product goes from a product to an application, which happens at the deployment phase. And finally, maintenance was regularly performed, but again, without much documentation about what was done, going back to kind of those release notes. Central IT has a service desk that's being rolled out, or maybe is rolled out. I don't know what the status of it is. Tanya can update us.
Yeah.
Tanya can update us on that. But the intent is to capture data points on all central IT issues. But again, taking into account the federated system that we have, that service desk model should also be used by the other IT staff to gain an accurate and comprehensive measurement of the effort for the organization. And then thinking about how maintenance then loops back into our cycle and serves for the basis for planning. These data points and measurements from the service desk can and should be reported to decision makers to determine if the application should be replaced or it's working effectively. So just to summarize, we have some systemic hurdles to IT governance for the county. As the structure has evolved, the governance is not kept up to cover custom development taking place in central IT and the other departments. Tanya has placed in a significant effort into closing some of those governance gaps. But right now the federated units are kind of doing as they see fit without little oversight. It's a risky practice that could result in a data breach or cyber attack. So, and also this report is pretty narrow in scope and focus, but many of the recommendations, and me and Tanya have talked about this, can be applied to overall IT governance, not just custom software development, but other software purchases, IT governance. So, Tanya, I'll turn it over to you. Do you have any questions, comments?
No, one correction, I think when you mentioned a governing body, you did say an IT, composed of IT people, and
IT experts, yeah.
I would like to clarify for anyone who would like to volunteer for this, but outside of IT as well. So we'd like to have some finance representation, other departments that could potentially help us, especially when we're looking at ROI and things that IT is not, that's not our world.
Good point.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions or comments from the group?
May I ask a question? I was wondering if you think there is any connection between the decentralization of the staff and any of the problems.
I think the amount of transition between the decentralized staff and where they're at, and kind of that push from those federated units to create their own software applications and they have their kind of own vision for what their department or office. That has kind of exacerbated the problem to where we have kind of independent wheels spinning that create a lot of risk outside of kind of a centralized system. So I think it's more not that they exist, but I think the rate at which they expanded created a lot of these issues. So.
And I would add to that is of not having centralized policies that kind of govern those areas, because they are looking out for their departments and offices where they're advocating and doing, what they need. But it may not be what the county needs, right? And so making sure that we're all following the same standards, guidelines, and being able to support them, because they have one IT person and they leave, right? So what happens when that person leaves? Then it is the expectation of central IT to take on those roles, and it's difficult. So I think it just creates complexity when you have those distributed IT units in many different areas, not just custom development.
So currently within the county, is there a movement to become more federated or less federated, or kind of leave things the way they are, or?
Well,
I can see
centralization is like a monumental,
Yeah.
I mean, it would require a massive buy-in and a massive amount of resources to pull those folks in under one umbrella. So I don't think the emphasis is there to kind of create that. It's kind of be business as usual with trying to put a little bit of an umbrella. Again, going back to Tanya's point of kind of like a guidance and a policy based where everybody's operating kind of at least in the same direction. I think that's the immediate move. I mean,
do see there is a pretty good argument you made for federalization too, I guess, from a department standpoint.
There's pros and cons to both.
Yep.
Yeah,
There's pros and cons
to both.
And I think it would be a huge change for the county, and I'm not sure if we're ready. But I think not only policy, but creating a group and an established almost requirements of people getting together, talking about what they're doing, creating transparency, following the same change management protocol, all those things would be very helpful to move us so that we are creating some consistency around the county.
And I would have actually said that while it may not be, when we look on the a line, right? Are we all the way at the end where everyone comes under one umbrella and only reports to Tanya as IT? That we're not going to get there. Yeah. And operationally probably may not even be best for the county, but there definitely is work being done. And this is probably, I would say, in many of the internal service areas, operations that touch on it, where these types of efforts are occurring to create more communication, organized policies and practices around that I think will be a huge step to moving that on that line.
And more cost effective. Yeah. This sounds expensive in general.
But it could also be they get results quicker with these departments, right? It's more agile, and they're meeting their business need, right? So it's important for those units to have that. But on the flip side, making sure that we're doing it in a responsible way, I think is important.
Yeah, when you think about the cost of data breach or the cost of an attack, it's like, what's the cost balance to that, right? It's like I'd much rather spend the cost to secure everything and make sure we're all doing the right thing as opposed to, oh, we'll just hold an insurance policy waiting for something bad to happen. So.
And I think what is something that we pointed out recently is we've got IT staff who are reporting to non-technical managers or department heads, and that creates it's difficult because the IT people then feel almost like they're on an island, but then which is also good, right? So I think there's a balance I think that we can find in this landscape that we're
currently. Okay. Anything else? I thought it was great report.
I'd like to ask, one of the things I think I would like Aaron and I more feedback from you all is whether you think any of the recommendations we made are really high priority, if they should be things that IT is focusing more on, that when we're doing our follow-up or our global follow-up in the future, that we should be focusing more on some of the implementation steps that Tanya outlined are long. There's a big project and it's going to take a long time. So I wondered if you all had any input to us about what we should be paying the most attention to as we all go on this journey.
I was thinking about your follow-up. I'm like, this is going to be, you'd have to do the follow-up in stages. When I looked at your recommendations, I'm like, you can't do this even just a year later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be, it'd follow our normal processes where we do that normal follow-up in 9 months, and then it would be included. Anything outstanding would still be included in that the annual end of the year follow-up, and we just kind of keep track in the process. But I think to Elizabeth's point, if there's areas that we thought the county should put more resources to or add some importance to, that's your prerogatives.
The way I read Tanya's response, there was an emphasis on the security components up front.
And there seemed to be kind of a built-in prioritization on risk versus reaching best practices for the policy stuff. And the policy development that seemed less related to risk, it looks like is further out. So that prioritization makes sense to me. And I appreciated how the response was organized.
I think the chronology of it, but down the path. Good approach.
Because at first I'm like, oh, there's so much, and where do I start?
There's a
How do I
lot.
do this?
Would you be able to touch on some of the other security work that's ongoing that really isn't necessarily related to, I think it's relevant just for a minute or two, that's not necessarily directly related to the audit report, just so folks know kind of where an ongoing emphasis is already underway.
Yep.
For instance, you just hired an additional security manager.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I'd love to talk about security. So we did, well, let me back up to a couple of years ago, right when I started, prior to my starting, just by a couple months, we had implemented an MSSP, which is a managed service security provider, which means that we outsource our work in order to be able to identify, detect, and respond to threats, which has been okay. I think there's areas that we can improve in that area, but they really are helping bolstering our security in that way. And supplementing my team. We just simply don't have the resources. We have to build out probably 5 to 10 people to be able to manage and look at all of the things that are going. There's logs, there's constant data happening all the time. We're getting alerts every single day. And we have to be able to determine, are these important, not important? Are they threats or are they not threats? And then react to those. And luckily, you know, feel very fortunate. We've got good policy or good tools in place to be able to assist us with finding out or finding and identifying those threats. So we brought on an information security manager probably about 3 months ago, who's really helping us create, you know, framework and plan and how do we move forward. We have identified lots of areas for improvement where we have vulnerabilities across the county, and that's including custom development, as well as on machines and all throughout our network. So we are working diligently to be able to prioritize that work and be able to understand where do we put our efforts towards, because we only have a limited amount of resources. So we asked for 2 positions, which I believe are going to be approved for this coming fiscal year, which will also help and bolster our security around Office 365 and the machines that we're all currently using, making sure they're consistent, making sure they're getting patching and updates. So lots of effort towards security. This is just one little piece that we can also help create consistency. And I think, you know, you touched on it a little bit about the software that we're looking at for the county. People find software that is going to make them efficient and they want it. But I think we just have to be diligent about it. And or they're wanting custom development, and maybe we need to look at off the shelf, looking at the software that's already out there. Is there something out there that can meet the need? So it's also trying to find the balance for all of the departments and offices out there who have a need. So how do we fill that need? So hoping to, you know, kind of create a whole process around software selection, whether internal or external, and then making sure it's secure. So having a procurement person is also super helpful to us, where we can rely on them to be able to kind of look at that, you know, what do we need and are we going to get that in the contract? So we're excited.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. Anything else?
Don't forget to fill out your survey.
Yeah, I thought it was great. Thank you. You know, the responses were really good too. I think it's, if nothing else, it gets people talking about it. And so I just.
Yeah, I appreciate everything that you have, and it was great, and it is supporting the strategic plan. So I appreciate that. So.
Okay, we've gone to the next report. City Clerk's Office integrated audit.
All right. So this part of the presentation is on the audit we did of the clerk's office. We did this as an integrated audit. So we've traditionally been doing cash handling audits every year that talk about how revenue is received within departments, The clerk's office receives a lot of revenue, so they've been a part of these in the past. But we were noticing that risk isn't, there are other risks developing rather than just cash handling, and we wanted to look more broadly at departments as we sort of cycle through them. So we added some procurement, IT objectives to the audit. So Steve is here, the clerk, and he was the first one to go through this process. So I really appreciate him and his staff's work to sort of help us as we kind of honed this idea of developing it. All right, so just a little background on what the clerk does. Do really two functions, running elections and also record keeping for the county. That includes recording property value and also acting as the custodian of county records generally going back to 1871. We also noted in the reports that the Shutes County clerk was the first in Oregon to put all of its land records online and also accept marriage application as well. So this chart just shows a little bit of context about the office. The black line shows staff, which increased over the past 5 years from 9 to 11, and then also showing revenue and expenses over the past 5 years. Revenue is tied to, a lot of their revenue is tied to property records and title transfers, mortgages, things like that. So it tends to cycle with the economy, with property sales, and since interest rates have been high, the revenues have come down. They may go up again once interest rates come down. Like I mentioned, we looked at more than just fiscal risks during this audit. So these are the areas that we're generally going to be focusing on in all departments, and not all of them necessarily apply to all departments. We're looking at areas of risk in human resources, performance reporting, fiscal controls, procurement and vendor management, grants, information technology, safety and accessibility, as well as any previous audit findings. For example, the clerk's office didn't have any grants, so that didn't apply in this situation. For field work, it was pretty standard. We have did interviews with staff. We also have checklists that we go through, looking at how cash is handled and also IT system checklists. We reviewed their IT system, which is called Helion, is that right? Helion, which is used for recording and receiving, and also just best practices related to these areas. And so we'll first go through our findings. The first finding was related to those financial risks. And what we noticed is that their financial procedures did not address some of the risks that we saw in their operations. So the county financial policy F7 is related to bank accounts and cash handling, and it tasks managers with documenting procedures to prevent fraud, to ensure that the money is supposed to goes where it's supposed to go. So these are the 4 areas we found of sort of higher risk that weren't really addressed with the procedures. The first was custody of cash. There was concurrent custody of cash where there was documentation of cash turning over to the cashier in the morning, how much cash they received, and then at the end of the day, a cashier would say, here's my till, it's balanced. But during the day, more than one person might have access to that till, and then also the tills were left unlocked. So really anybody who was in the office could have had access to that cash. Another thing we saw was that mail, there's some money is coming in through the mail. Because the clerk has had some security issues and actually has received suspicious mail, they're opening the mail in a isolated area But the person who opens the mail doesn't document their custody of the mail. When receipts come into the mail and they're safe, they then take them out and give them to various clerks. But there's no documentation of that transaction between staff. There was a supervisor review at the end of the day, documented within procedures, but there wasn't any instructions for what supervisors should be looking for. So we were thinking items they might want to check for would include starting drawer balances, how many voids were done throughout the day, just giving the supervisors a little bit more guidance about what they should be looking for when they receive those closeout reports. And then finally, the office wasn't reconciling its deposits. So at the end of the day, they would turn over all of the receipts to finance, but they weren't getting a report back to ensure that finance was crediting all of those receipts to where they were supposed to go. We think the cause of not having all of those procedures documented was that the office hadn't done a fraud risk assessment. And this is something we recommended also in our last cash handling audit to the Expo Center. But just to take some time to sit down and think about how your processes could be exploited, what risks you are willing to take in order to take advantage of efficiencies, or what risks you're not willing to take, and controls you might put in place to mitigate those risks. So we shared some resources with the clerk's office from the Australian Government Commonwealth Fraud Prevention Center. Has some nice resources on how to conduct a fraud risk assessment. Yeah. Our recommendations there were that first they should conduct a fraud risk assessment and document outcomes. They agreed and said they will be doing that. Once they have conducted that assessment, we recommended that they adopt and document procedures meant to address those fraud risks, and they agreed and said they would be updating their procedures. The second area we looked at where we had a finding was related to procurement. So there are state rules that say that everything, all payments to vendors above $25,000 need to follow certain competitive procurement processes. The county has a rule saying that any contracts over $50,000 now, but that was previously $25,000, have to be signed or approved by the administrator, and if it's even higher, signed and approved by the Board of Commissioners. And also that contracts should be in place for these larger purchases, just because contracts help protect the county from risk and also ensure that services will be met. So we looked at the 5 largest payments to vendors, and these are what they were for, and then whether or not there was a contract in place, whether competitive procurement had been conducted, and whether the appropriate signature was on the contract. And so here, we found inconsistencies with compliance with those rules. One thing to say is that there is a exemption in county code for materials associated with ballot printing, and so that top one there was exempt from competitive procurement, even though it's above the threshold for a state law. So on this one, we recommended that the clerk's office consult with the new county procurement staffer to get some guidance on putting contracts in place and competitive procurement. The county recently hired a procurement expert, and so she's just getting started. So I think Steve said that the office will consult with her on their procurements going forward. Oh, and then we also recommended putting contracts in place, conducting competitive procurements where appropriate, and getting administrator sign off on those contracts. The last area anyway, the next area we looked at, I'm losing track, was related to IT. And so we saw a few different things in IT. The first one was a role conflict. So there was a process within how records are received and processed within the office whereby one clerk was supposed to record the record, and then there was another stage where another clerk would review. There was a setting within the IT system to allow to segregate these two duties, so the same person could not perform both of these functions. But that setting had been disabled, and so people were able to both record and review documents. We estimated that it happened about 33% of transactions. Management estimated that it was happening about 25% of transactions. The reason it happens sometimes is because they're just to expedite transactions when transactions come in late in the day or there's just too much work. Sometimes the same clerk would record and review transactions. For this one, we recommended, and we didn't want to come right out and say that those things should necessarily be segregated. We wanted management to take a look at how often it was needed, because if they really did need to get documents out in a quick manner, maybe in some cases it would be appropriate to have the same person perform both of those functions. So our recommendation was to first conduct an analysis, and then if they decided that they wanted those to be segregated, to have the duties segregated, and if not, then to formally accept risk within their procedures. So they said that they've conducted an informal risk assessment that they haven't documented, and also though that they will formally segregate those procedures going forward. So maybe it's not important to document the risk since they are deciding to segregate the procedures. The next recommendation, or the next finding, was related to voided receipts. Here we found that the same person could both create a transaction and void a receipt. And so this creates a risk of fraud if someone takes some money in and they can give the person a receipt, but then if they void it, it doesn't look like a receivable in the system. So sort of best practice is that a second person would have to void the receipt if there was a reason to void the receipt. They had disabled this, again, for efficiency, because sometimes it needs to happen very quickly, and it's good for the clerk to be able to void a receipt rather than calling someone over to stop the transaction and get that taken care of. But we did an analysis, just not really, just sort of looking at a few days, so not really a representative, but oh no, this one we did look at every day. So we looked at every day, and there were no voided receipts on 70% of days, and on those remaining days there was maybe one. And there were a couple of days when there was trainings where there was a bunch, but in that case, there would be a supervisor there who could void receipts. They also said that there were a couple of mitigating controls in place that would make this risk not as high as it might seem. First of all, customers usually need a document number when they have a transaction. If they didn't get a document, if the receipt was voided, there wouldn't be a document number, and they would complain if they didn't have a document number. Staff might also notice a missing index number because all of the documents are indexed in a serial manner. There were also cameras in place, so if cash went missing at a certain time, you would know to look at the camera and see who was at that till. With all those in place, but those mitigating procedures weren't documented anywhere. So we recommended that the clerk's office really document the workflow impacts of what it would really mean to require a supervisor to approve voids, and then decide whether or not it made sense for their workflows to have supervisor require voids. And this one, sort of similar to the last one, rather than documenting that process, they just decided that they wouldn't, that they would require supervisor authorization for voids, and that they would update the procedures to show that. And then the last one related to IT that we saw was related to a shared account. So the receiving system, most staff all had their own account numbers, and so if they would conduct transactions in the system, it would be associated with that person. But in some cases, when more than one staff person needed to use a workstation, if someone was on lunch or something and someone else needed to just jump in, it would take too long for that person to log out of the system, and so instead log in. So instead of logging in, they would just use the shared system, the shared account. That shared account, then you couldn't tell if it was this person or this person who was doing those transactions. So if something went wrong, you wouldn't know who was associated with that. This is not something unique to the clerk's office. This is also something we saw at the Fair and Expo Center. So, but also something that is against county policy to have shared user accounts. So we recommend that staff, again, we recommended that they decide, how important it was for them to have this shared account. And then if it was important, to document why it was important, and if it wasn't important, then to not use it. And again, like the last two, they just decide to disable the shared account. We also looked at purchasing card transactions. So a purchasing card is like a credit card that we would all use, but because the county can't have credit, it's just a card used for payments, but it's like a credit card. But you would use it in cases where it's not feasible to get an invoice. So if you need to buy just a few office supplies, or if you need to buy plane tickets or training or something like that, you could use the purchasing card. What we found is that we looked at all of the transactions, and all the transactions were appropriate, but the purchasing card wasn't secured during the day. So it was just sort of left in a bin in the office, and anyone who needed it could go and grab it. Now, no one had done anything wrong, but because of this, anyone wanting to do something wrong really could have just taken it and done something, and then it would have been hard to figure out who did it. Our county purchasing card policy says that the person whose name is on account needs to have control of the card at all times. So like in our office, when the administrative person has the card, if I need to use it, I'll go to her and say, I need to use it. She says, okay, use it, but she expects me to come back, 20 minutes, and she'll say, and you need to give me receipts and everything. So they weren't doing that. But all the transactions were appropriate still. But so we're making a recommendation that they start keeping the payment card secured, and they have agreed to do that. We also looked at performance measures for their department, and I have to say, I think this is going to be an issue for a lot of departments that we look at. The county's performance measures seem to not be very good across the board. The clerk had actually some good performance measures, and I think really had thought about how do we measure our workload? How do we measure our outcomes? They survey customer service and they report on that. But partially because of the way the software requires things to be measured, and then also just maybe as an oversight, some of the performance measures weren't reported in a very useful way. So for example, there was a measure related to staffing compared to the number of pages reported that didn't have any data associated with it. And then staff said, well, that's because this is only an annual, this is only reported annually, it's not reported each year. There was another one, I think this one here, the staff, no, it was staff to voter registration was reported as in progress, meaning that they hadn't achieved it, even though they had achieved the goal of staffing that they should have wanted, that they were saying they wanted. So our recommendation was just to kind of go back in and clean up the performance reporting, make it a little more useful, a little more readable. They did agree to change the one that we thought should be reported as achieved rather than in progress, but they disagreed with some of the other ones and changing how those would be reported. And the final, right, and this is the final recommendation. This was a funny one. We had done a transition audit of the clerk's office a couple of years ago, and found that there was this line in code that made them responsible for printing documents to machine operators, informing machine operators about weed control rules. Everyone had said this is probably not something that should be in the clerk's office. This is really a program that the road department runs. But it had been a couple of years and the change hadn't been made in code. So we brought it up again just to clean it up and make sure things were making more sense. And they have done that. There was a second hearing on Wednesday. So
I think Steve would love to be in charge of the.
I can spend the afternoon at the road department.
I think it's other duties as assigned.
Exactly. Yeah, put it back on the list.
That's right.
I mean, yeah. Come on, Steve. This has got to be fun.
I got some weeds at my place.
Yeah, exactly. On that. Well,
and then we also included some observations, and these were areas where we didn't have findings because things were going well. And so one was that the door was repaired to the office. We did a review of ADA and safety kind of inspection of the office space, and everything was fine. One issue we found was that their front door, it could be opened, but it wasn't automatically opened. And that was because an emergency switch was broken. And so when we let them know about that, we brought it up again. They worked with facilities, with Lee's staff and got the door fixed. So that is a good outcome. And then the last one is that there were some outstanding recommendations that Homeland Security had made to the office, just on it sort of a volunteer assessment that they had done just to get some technical assistance from Homeland Security. And so all of those recommendations are now resolved. So off the list. That is all. So if anyone has questions, and also we really would like you to complete our survey because that's one of our performance measures, and we really do value that feedback from all of you. Did you want to say anything?
yeah, I have some comments and some cleanup on it, but first, any questions from me directly? I just want to point out first as well, and everything's in our comments, so you can you've probably read our comments, but in the previous audit for IT and software, there was a nice 20-year trend highlighted in there. On our audit, there was a 5-year scope for as far as our revenue goes and our staffing levels. So going back, we expand that 5 years to 20. We're right now at 11 FTE in our department. 20 years ago, we were 10.5. That dropped down a little bit because of the continuity or the strength of the team that was there. They'd been there a long time, so they could do a lot more with fewer. We've built up our staff over the last couple of years, over the last few years, to prepare for retirements that have taken place and a couple more to come, for that continuity, so that our office and level of service maintain. So again, 20 years from 10.5 to 11 today is notable considering the growth in the county. You look at any other department, I think it might be hard stretch to find anyone that hasn't expanded staffing that much more. So taking that 5 years and just drawing it out. Same with the revenue. 5 years, yeah, we were, things were good 5 years ago. You know, interest rates were down and the revenue was fantastic. Until that goes back up, as Elizabeth mentioned. You know, we're in this, we're flat right now as far as revenue goes, and that it's tied to the recorded document and the page number, the page counts that we record. But expanding over the last 20 years, you know, we're a net contributor to the county's general fund by $12 million. But over the last few years, we are not, or we might still be a contributor, but over the last couple of years, we're not. So again, I just want to point that out. 20 years is a really good number. If worked for the last audit, it should have been on this one. You mentioned that we had received suspicious mail. We didn't. Other counties have, and other counties here in Oregon and other states. So in preparation for that, we've adjusted our practices to open mail in a secure environment, and that's an additional piece on that. We rarely receive checks in the mail. It's not cash. The checks are made out to our department, so that chance for fraud is minimal there. It's not, you know, somebody taking that check and going to walk out the door with it. Just want to bring that up. Procurement, I do hear that, and I've been looking forward to that procurement manager coming on board. And I almost gave her a hug when I met her, and I know that wouldn't have been appropriate, but I was really excited to meet her right out of the gate. So looking forward to working with Heather, and I have been for some time, long before I knew that it was when that hiring was going to happen. A lot of these other things are related to, we're a small department, even at 11, and we need, we have 3 windows at the front, and yes, people do shift around quite a bit. We cover breaks, we cover vacations, we cover lunches. So there's a constant moving around. So that's why the reasoning for it, for the history of having a shared password, or somebody sharing the till while somebody's on break, or what, things like that. But those changes have been made, and rightfully so. The other thing in being that small department, and as far as the piece where it was mentioned about the fact that staff can record and index and verify their own work. Same thing, we're in and out. Something's recorded, we're there for that. It also, at the end of the day, all that information needs to be finalized and updated and uploaded for as an index for our customers. So we have to get that work done, and that's part of that the spirit of having one person being able to do it. But I understand the concern, and we've made that change. Voids, as Elizabeth mentioned, it's going to be there. Any voids will be done by either supervisor or myself. The P card, it was mentioned that it was unsecured. It wasn't sitting out in a bin on our front counter. It was sitting on in a secure bin that we lock up every night, and it's sitting on a shelf in our office that, yes, anybody could see, but that the understanding in our office is that anything in that bin is secure. But we've modified that practice to make sure that the P card itself is locked up in a safe throughout the day unless it's in use. But it wasn't willy-nilly just hanging around. Just want to make for a point of clarification there. Performance measures. Sure, I'd like to show a graph of 5, 10, 20 years as we used to do, but the current software that's being utilized can only support a narrative structure. So we're telling the story in a narrative format as best we can. We've been doing it since that software was created without much feedback from anybody saying that this is not telling the story that we're looking for. that could have been from any department. So it's great to hear that it's not telling the story properly. The other piece about it is I'm the one that enters that information, you know, with the information from our provided by my supervisors as well. And I might have missed a button here or there, and you know, maybe and not notice it, but I'm glad that this was highlighted so that so we can clean that up and make sure that anytime we update information is maintained. But highly recommend supporting of images and things like that. So if you're looking for that time over time story. Weed control is on the thank you to legal for getting that on the board's agenda, and it's been heard once. It'll be in a second reading, and that responsibility it will be shifted back over to the road department. The door repair, it's not like our doors weren't working or inaccessible or out of compliance. They were in compliance with ADA. There was a feature on them, and it wasn't that they would automatically open. It would be in the morning, maybe we would like to prop them open so that there's sitting on the magnetized strip and remain open. And there was a mechanism that used to be there, but since our renovation was removed, our renovation 6 years ago, that was removed, that would allow us behind the counter to hit a switch and release the magnet so that in the event of an emergency, the doors would automatically close. That wasn't in place, the doors, and then out of security concerns by my staff, they felt safer if the doors were closed if we were not able to hit that button from behind the counter. So that remained an outstanding issue, but I had been working with facilities to get that fixed. May have fallen off the radar by a vendor or something like that, but it wasn't like our office was inaccessible or unwelcoming. We were open for business, and our customers never expressed any concern. And then about any ADA issues, there's nothing has been reported against our office in the history of at least being in this building, as far as I'm aware.
And I'll just add it wasn't a broken part. It was a programming issue that when we created the lockdown function, we were no longer able to have the security software interface with the fire alarm software. And so the hold open is a fire alarm feature. The lockdown is a security Linnell controlled access feature. And the security company wasn't able to program the fire alarm, and we didn't have that programming capability when the office was remodeled. So when it came back up and came back up in the audit, we reached out again to both companies, and it ended up being a fire alarm company that was able to find a way to program the fire alarm to interplay with the security software.
And thanks again for having it resolved. It is nice to have our doors open, and then in the event of an emergency, being able to just hit the button and have them shut.
So now the security button is able to interplay with the fire alarm to release it in the case of emergency.
As far as what was presented in a nutshell, like I said, I think our comments kind of speak to the rest of it. But I welcome this audit. Initially, I thought it was a cash handling audit out of the gate. It was pretty quick that it expanded, or that it changed, or at least my understanding of it had changed to an integrated audit, which encompassed a lot more. But I welcomed it as a cash audit, especially because there are certain things that I know that we could have, we could always improve. And I think as a result of this audit, we're improving in a lot of processes. There were some things that I'm not sure rose to the level, but glad to clean these things up, and I appreciate the efforts.
We did have an entrance meeting where we discussed the objectives of the complete list of objectives.
Yeah. And again, if I missed that out of the gate, yeah, that was on me.
Any questions or comments from?
I like this more holistic look rather than just the bread and butter cash handling old school audit. This gives a more complete picture. It gives the department more to look at, and also as we look at other departments, you can see if there's something going across the board. It gives you a better view. So I was very happy when I saw the report.
And I think the performance measures might be an example of that. Something we haven't looked at countywide, but we might see that there's a risk coming up there by looking at individual departments.
You'll probably see more trends, I think.
You might also see that trend. I mean, if you're a few departments in and you're already having to raise the flag of saying you should be proactively conducting a risk assessment, have that go before you, have it be maybe a recommendation by an admin or somebody to say this is a good idea for you to do. If you're now 2 for 2 or 2 for 3 or whatever it is, if multiple departments you're seeing that deficiency that we haven't had that risk assessment done, where that's not my field. What I could have known, but I didn't. But be proactive about it and suggest that departments before we get there might be helpful.
We did talk about that in a department head wide meeting, and I shared those resources at that meeting too. And hopefully people are paying attention. But
Can I have something?
I think her name just happens to be at the bottom of that.
Okay, she's here. Yeah, I thought maybe she had a question. She's sitting there. I don't know. Okay.
If I can throw out one more suggestion too, or a request in the future, I know the dates and the timeframes were very clear as far as when this audit was going to take place. It was through an election, which is obviously a busy time for us. Not just the dates, but maybe the time commitment would be helpful for the department to know, as you're going into it, these are the deliverable dates, but maybe it's going to be 10 hours of your staff or 5 hours of your staff or whatever it might be. I think that information might be helpful to add to the time frame.
it's hard for us to know how much time it's going to take staff.
So what you find?
Yeah, and also what if you have all the documentation ready to go, it could just be like, oh, here it is. But if it isn't there, then it can take longer, like to explain that. So I think that's a reason. And I think timing on audits is always hard. I think the external auditors are able to share because they do the same thing every year, and Jana does a great job. I know she does a lot of work preparing documents for them. It's just different.
Well, even our external, when they have a new auditing standard or a new standard that the county's implementing, so
Okay. Anything else before we move on? Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know it's gotta be a busy year for you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And so next time, don't do it during a little election then, right?
Yeah, well, unless we are auditing the election.
Unless we're auditing the election.
Yeah, isn't that next?
Out of respect for county council and his time, he showed up to discuss the status report. So if I.
Oh no, yeah, the other discussion item.
Oh, the other discussion.
Oh,
So could we move that up? I kind of gave him
Absolutely.
a heads up, and
yeah,
it's well past that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we do that.
if we could shift some things around the agenda.
We'll move item number 6 up and.
And actually, this is Kathleen's agenda item.
It is, but I actually think it would be fine if we did this part.
Well, he was just here to support, but also to talk about if we needed to go into executive session.
Oh, okay.
But so maybe you could discuss like why we were.
Okay, how about I intro it?
Yeah.
And then we can see what Dave has to say and we'll incorporate that. Is that great? Okay, so one topic that we've been discussing is the performance evaluation process for the internal auditor. And through some discussions, the current practice is not we'd like to explore other opportunities for that. And so one of the things that we wanted to look at, we have in here is a proposal on how that could look. And then we want to have a conversation about with the team here about what that should look like, what interests are we meeting, everything that you would want to see in terms of an evaluation process. And in that, we started looking into where pieces of this particular process might want to be conducted in a and then also other topics that occur that want to be conducted in an executive session. And so there were some discussions then, I understand, with legal counsel to look at what that process might look like, and then that expanded into even more conversations about bylaws, et cetera. So that's sort of setting the table around that discussion. I think then we can turn it over to Dave to talk about those pieces, and we can come back to look at the processes. We might actually be more informed than to talk about the performance piece as well.
Just a Question, so is the ultimate goal to establish more independence for the audit function? The audit function is that the goal, or is it?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Is make sure going into the conversation, that's what it is. Okay.
Well, hello, I don't know that I know everybody on the audit committee, but I'm Dave Doyle, I'm the county's attorney. Afternoon, Judge, good to see you. You learn that always, you always recognize the judge if you're a lawyer, no matter where you recognize it. But in any event, yeah, executive sessions, this is a public body, and so as a public body, you're able to meet in executive session for a certain laundry list of reasons. And in this particular instance, evaluating the performance of the internal auditor would be one of those who qualifies. And so if you were inclined to do that, you could do that. We prepared a little announcement that you read and you usher folks out of the meeting at that point that don't need to be here, including any public members that might be here. Likewise, if you have the Zoom running or the live stream, you would turn that off, turn it back on when you reconvene. In executive session, you can discuss and talk and get into the weeds, but you can't make any final decisions. You have to come out of executive session, back into your regular session to make any final decision. But everything up to that can occur in executive session. And certainly one of the reasons I think for evaluation, employee evaluation is to be a little more candid and open without, you know, the being under the microscope of what the public might perceive or not perceive of that, or other staff members that might be here in an open session, but be asked to leave in an executive session. So you do have that ability. County legal's available at any time, even in the middle of one of your meetings. If something comes up, you think you might want to go into executive session, you can holler, and one of us can come running down here and, you know, let you know whether that fits or not. It's a pretty tight, narrow list that the state identifies. The idea is the public's business should occur in public. But there are limited exceptions where you can go into executive session, like I say, to evaluate the internal auditor would be one of those. So I think that was the extent of what you wanted from me. I don't know, is that something you're planning to do today?
No.
No, it says in the memo, we're doing it in July, I believe, according to this memo.
Yes.
Yeah. So in any event, if you want to do that, again, I provided Elizabeth and Aaron with a copy of the announcement you would need to read before you can be in executive session. And then when you come back out of executive session, you restart up your regular session, you open the door, invite folks back in if anybody was here and stepped out, you turn your live stream back on, your Zoom back on, and you make a final decision if in fact you're going to make one at that time. You can have an executive session that's informational only, so you come out of executive session and there's no final decision to make at that point. It's just based information. So it gives you that ability of latitude to do that.
Dave, I think one of the things that'll likely be addressed as we go through the evaluation process is a discussion around bylaws, processes, and subcommittees. Is there anything that we should consider around executive session, or should there be processes established around going in and out of executive session that we should be aware of?
You could certainly come up with some internal governing document that sort of tries to dictate when and how you'll go into executive session, but you could also do it ad hoc as well. The important thing would be that the audit committee agenda indicate that an executive session may be called at some point during the meeting. And as long as that's noted on your agenda, you have the ability of the public body to convene into executive session. Ideally, if you know you're going to do it, you want to identify the subject matter. In this case, you know, employee evaluation. If for some reason you were discussing a litigation matter, that'd be another one that you could go into executive session for. So if you know ahead of time, that generic topic should appear under the heading executive session. Doesn't obligate you to go into executive session. You might decide not to after all. And again, like I said, you can sort of ad hoc on the fly decide you're going to go into executive session, provided the agenda notes that you may go into executive session.
And if they were to establish a subcommittee specific to the evaluation process, that same subcommittee would have the ability to go in and out of an executive session.
If they're fewer than a quorum on the subcommittee, would they even need to announce a public meeting?
If there's fewer than a quorum of the larger audit committee, no, at that point it's an administrative process more than an operational political process. So if it's a subcommittee of your audit committee, they can meet apart from a public setting, and then report back in the public setting to you folks, to the full audit committee. I don't know that you want necessarily, you have a pretty small body, so I don't know that you need a subcommittee, but you do have some discretion if you chose to do that. We have about 7 on the nine. Yes, today. Well, 4 of you could meet and talk, and that's not, that doesn't violate anything because you're not a quorum. And 5 or more. There's a lot. It's not like a county commissioner where you got 3, 2 of them can never speak. Yeah, right. It always has to be
Never.
Never.
Yes. So it's 3 is very challenging for that reason. When you have a governing body of 3, they can never speak outside of the meeting on a matter of county concern, or they're technically violating the public meeting laws. So that's always been a challenge, but you know, you work around it as best you can.
Dave, do we need to list the subject of the executive session or announce that? Or can we just say that we may go into executive session and then the chair calls it?
And then it would be announced what the subject matter is, absolutely, before you convene. And that's part of the announcement we prepared that would identify the particular topic. And again, if you know in advance when you're preparing the agenda, then I'd strongly recommend that it be on the agenda. Again, it doesn't obligate you. So if you change your mind mid-meeting and decide you don't need that session that you had put on your agenda, you don't have to have it. But if you know going in that you're going to have it at the time you're preparing your agenda, it's a best practice to go ahead and put it on there. And so the public and the media have an idea that, you know, there's a chance you're going to be going into each session to discuss, again, you know, employee evaluation, for instance. And, you know, I will, you know, sessions tend to get the attention of the media. I don't know how often the media appears at any of your meetings. I would think not all that often. And I say that not as a besmirch. I've been a county attorney for 30 years now between here and Polk County, and I can tell you, I've done 31 budget hearings in those years, and I can count maybe on one hand the time there was more than 2 or 3 people from the public in the room. But if we raise dog licensing fees like $3, it's standing room only. So again, you folks do very important stuff, but it doesn't always resonate out. So I doubt that you have the public here a whole lot.
Just bring up pickleball, then they all show up.
Dogs, code enforcement, pickleball, a couple other things, yeah. $500 million budget.
Yes. Nobody's there.
Yeah.
It's really scary.
It's amazing.
License some cats.
Yeah.
If a member of the press was at that meeting and asked to attend the executive session, they get to attend it.
They are allowed to attend all executive sessions except labor negotiations. That's the one that you can exclude them out of. Not that you folks would be engaged in that, but the county commissioners have that ability when they go into executive session for that.
So matters of personnel, they'd be allowed?
They're allowed. Now, they're not allowed to report on it other than to indicate that the body went into session under the general topic of employee evaluation or litigation or property transactions or what have you. But they can't report on the substance of what was said. Now, I will tell you, they can triangulate around that, and oftentimes after executive sessions where we've had the media a day or 2 later, or sometimes 15 minutes later, we get public records requests, and they're kind of getting at it. And so there's ways that you can work around that, and we see that happen. And it's perfectly legal. I'm not, you know, bad mouthing the media for that. That's, if they can figure out a different way to get at that information, they have the ability to do that. But it does give them a little bit of an advantage sitting into the executive session and hearing about it, to then go see if they can find a way to backdoor into it with a public records request. But that's the system we have. And again, it's predicated upon the business of government supposed to be done open and transparent, and with very, very limited exceptions, that's how it's supposed to operate. So, and that all grew out of all the sunshine laws after Watergate in the 70s. That was where the history of all these types of provisions grew out of Watergate. Started in California, the Brown Act, that's the biggie, and then all the other states followed that. So like back in the 60s, you go to executive session, talk about anything you want, and you didn't have to tell anybody. But it's different since the mid-70s.
All right, so then Kathleen has sort of an next steps for the performance evaluation, because my performance evaluation is due at the end of July, so coming up.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, folks. Thanks for all that you do.
Thank you.
See you next time. I think I'm up next with legal.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's good.
There's an integrated audit.
So what we just saw,
Mhm.
yeah, no, of cash handling. I mean, there are, but not cash. I think in terms of bringing up this topic, I kind of did a little bit of an introduction. And historically, the evaluation process has occurred between the internal auditor and the county administrator directly. And so there was interest with administrations, really with the county administrator, and discussions with the internal auditor to bring that to this group and have the internal or the audit committee complete the evaluation process. So we've met a couple times and we've put together this proposal here. I will give a little bit of background, is that the county itself is currently going through and redrafting our evaluation process. So timing is interesting. We are in a pilot. We're not prepared to be this public with that yet. So we're, really sort of testing and trying to break that process and those systems internally before we look externally. So what we have proposed here is utilizing our current, so I'll say old, tools and some processes with the idea that over the next year, one of the things that that could be considered by the committee is to maybe adopt the newer process. And what's nice about some of the newer processes is it has more room to consider some of some different performance measures or some different core competencies, right? So we have kind of an established set that we test everyone on or against, and with the new process, there's ways for more input. So if the committee wanted to look at certain components that aren't on our existing process, we would be able to do that going forward. So wanted to kind of throw that out there. Specifically, I would be happy to go through the proposal. If anyone's read it, we could just jump right to questions. Kind of would look to focus here how we wanted to proceed.
So just one, I know in the current process, members of the audit committee submit. The county administrator sends out an email to us saying, give us input on the performance of the internal auditor. So that's what we've been doing up to this point. So we're going to change that, and how we're going to change. What are we going to do now?
Sure. So,
yeah. Is it helpful for me just to kind of step into the Wayback Machine and just kind of share that I've been county administrator it'll be 3 years in September. And so for my first year and a half to 3 quarters, I just continued what Tom's practice was with Dave. And so that's what you're familiar with is Tom would solicit feedback from audit committee members, assemble those, complete the evaluation, and that was it.
That was it.
And that was good. And that was good. As Elizabeth started, we looked at the code, and I recall, and I'll just say it, she kind of reached out to a department head to ask some questions, and the department head said, well, I think I'd like to have Nick involved. And Dave said, well, actually, Nick doesn't need to be involved. The county internal auditor's independent. And so that really began I thought, very good conversation about the role. And we really looked at the code and gained a clearer understanding that the internal auditor reports to the audit committee, and administratively, I approve the timesheet. If she's going to be gone for a period of time, she says, hey, any issues with my being gone, with any operations? Hey, no, we're good. It's just administrative functions. So we started talking and included Kathleen and thought, if the internal auditor reports to the audit committee, then let's change. This is a good opportunity to change it and have the audit committee complete her evaluation. I'm certainly happy to be involved. Department heads, however you wish, and however you choose to go forward. We just thought this was a nice evolution in the process, and I think we're in agreement on moving in that direction. I see her, Elizabeth, agreeing. So that, I just want to kind of bring everybody up to speed to how we got to the point of where we're at, and that kind of maybe sets the table for where we're going.
Well, it's helpful to know the internal workings, because we're not a part of that, we don't see that every day, so it's good to hear that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, what we looked at is creating a process that we, where the internal auditor would and does present sort of goal setting and audit plan development at a period of time, right? We're looking at sort of the annual process. And so depending upon how that goes, we could look to kind of expand it to performance goals included in that more, or identify those that would be part of the performance evaluation. I mean, the audit plan is the performance of the audit plan, I would say, does fall into the internal auditor, and so that is kind of to be considered in the process. That's one of the proposals that we have there. And then another piece is a self-assessment. So this would be one of those areas where that's different, right? And some folks do currently include self-assessment within their process. In our new system, we actually do have a more structured self-assessment that we would ask. In this, I would say it's kind of a transition process here. We would look to have the internal auditor review kind of where they feel that how they've met goals, et cetera, and answer a few questions, and then have that available to the audit committee. One of the things that we talked about is that ideally that would happen about 3 months prior to the annual performance review being completed. Given our current timeline, it's probably not. We're behind. We are. So you know, so we talked about maybe doing an abridged version that can then be emailed out to folks, or do we just sort of step beside that whole process this time anyway? So that's one of those decision points that I think we'll want to talk about today for this transition program, and then we will have time to over the next year look at or if we want to make decisions now, will a self-assessment be included in the next year's program? And then comes down to, with that self-assessment, the actual performance review. So we looked at, you know, the audit committee members shall each submit their individual evaluations to the county administrator. And what we talked about was that we actually would recommend either looking at a subcommittee. So we talked about that, that takes feedback and creates one evaluation, or that the subcommittee is responsible for, or the entire committee is responsible for that process, but still with that one evaluation coming forward. And we looked at, is that the county administrator, human resources, who would help facilitate that process? Subcommittee. So that's one of the areas that's another area where we would like to get some feedback from the committee on how you would like that to go. Let's see. And then moving into the next would be that the audit committee chair would provide, or if it was a subcommittee, the chair of the subcommittee would provide the composite evaluation document and discuss the internal auditor's overall evaluation with the internal auditor in an executive session. With either the entire committee there, or if this was something that the committee wanted to sort of fully hand off to the subcommittee, and then the subcommittee report back to the full committee. So again, looking at how we incorporate the subcommittee or not into that piece. And then the administrative component behind it, a performance evaluation. So where we're recording meeting or exceeding expectations, all of that piece, that it's been completed timely, etc., that can be handed off either to county administration or to human resources directly from the committee to then go and record and process appropriately within our systems. So that's what we're presenting. And then of course, I think there's some adjustments to this year if we're going to do sort of a transition one, given the timing of where we are in the process, that we do need to record something by the end of July.
So Kathleen, are all of us supposed to fill out one of these then if we're a member of the committee, or are you going to consolidate something?
So that's what I think that the committee needs to decide is, my recommendation is that one be completed. It can be that each person completes one. And actually, when we were looking at different processes at other organizations, we kind of found a little bit of both. That some organizations, everybody completed one. And I thought, oh, that's intense. And then in other organizations, there was, you know, feedback and a consensus, where one actual document was created and supplied to the auditors.
You have to get that consensus though.
And that can be a tricky piece, which is maybe why other people went with you get some.
Well, you could get them all and then just consolidate them. You know, if it's in between, you could say meets expectations plus or something, you know, depending.
Let's throw, maybe we should throw the subcommittee versus
That's a great topic.
audit committee question, kind of try to resolve that right now. I mean, there are pros and cons for both. We are a relatively small group. There's only 9 of us. A subcommittee would probably be what, 3 or 4. And there may be some folks on the committee that wouldn't be in the subcommittee that might want to give some input. And I guess they could do that, but.
One reason it might be easier to have a subcommittee is you don't have to make it a public meeting, announce it. So, yeah, you know, we have to get this agenda on the county website a week ahead of time. So it's a bit harder to schedule, whereas if 3 people could just get together, you know, amongst themselves without a little more informally.
And to coordinate having a full quorum.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Especially this.
I like the idea of the subcommittee, just, you know, logistics.
So
Especially since it's summer.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, next year we could still use the subcommittee and then have everybody join executive session to round it out if needed.
On the subcommittee.
Yeah.
What, 3?
Well, it would have to be less than 5.
Yeah, 3 sounds appropriate.
Good.
And wouldn't the purpose of the subcommittee be basically, I mean, everybody would provide input in whatever form that will somehow align with whether, I don't know. And then the subcommittee really, in my view, is just to kind of get around the timing issue we have. And then the way I've seen it done in other places is that you have a kind of a numerical ranking, and then the subcommittee would combine the scores and come up with a number, and then but also the person who's being evaluated would hear all of the individual, see all of the individual comments, but maybe not without attribution as part of the final evaluation. But the subcommittee is just kind of it's a clearinghouse.
So feedback from all committee members to subcommittee. The subcommittee then creates the one document to provide, right?
One could say, not 3, yes, you know, 3 or 9 or whatever.
I'm willing to be on the subcommittee. I'm not a real great personnel guy or anything like that, but I'm familiar with how the county evaluates employees. Because I've been doing it. I'd like to have a section on appearance of workstation.
So then if you do it proportionally, then 2 of the other people should be from the public members. Because if we have 3 from county management, if you want to do it, Judge.
Yeah, I'll be the one for the county.
Thank you.
So the other 2 should be public members.
Well, if you want to be consistent, aren't we always consistent? Of course we are.
Everybody volunteer, we have volunteers, anybody that really wants to do it. You said we'll add it that way. So
we could volunteer Joe. He's not here today.
I guess their feelings hurt.
Joe in summer, right?
Joe in summer.
Yeah.
Sean told.
Why not?
It's when you wanted them. I guess I don't we don't know what their interest level is, but
That's something we could survey out after the meeting or something like that, just to
We shouldn't
include.
be doing surveys.
Okay, never mind.
I think that is something we should do, for the public meetings rules.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm gonna be out, I think, just because I haven't been here.
Yeah. You'll get your, you'll get your.
You get to do it next year.
I've only been here half a year, so.
We'll rotate. I'll do it.
Okay, that's okay.
Thank you, Jody.
Okay,
One more.
so,
Carol, are you?
I mean, I can. I have time.
Okay. We have a subcommittee.
So I have one document issue, got that.
Does the subcommittee want to get, like an evaluation from me ahead of time, like a self-evaluation? Ahead of the meeting?
I think that's how, that'll be helpful.
We can work on it.
Yeah.
I guess I would give you my self-evaluation. You would meet, the subcommittee would meet. I don't know if you would want to solicit feedback or how you would want to solicit feedback from the broader committee or even from other department heads here.
I serve on a state commission, and so, and this is exactly the process that we use. So we have the chair and the vice chair that are kind of make up the subcommittee, and we work with the human resources staff. And then the human resources staff kind of sends out the evaluation and says, please complete well, first of all, the staff member, the director does the self-evaluation, circulates to everybody, and then here's the evaluation tool. Please, within a week, submit comments back to, I don't need to put it just on you, but it could be administration, whichever everybody thinks it's best. We assemble it, and then we briefly meet with the subcommittee to say, okay, this is the feedback that we've received from everybody, and then there's the executive session meeting where you have the conversation of this is what, however, it can just organically flow or it can be facilitated by.
Considering the fact that we're not here, someone inside has to, facilitate and manage the thing. We're not here every day. We're doing our thing, somewhere else.
Yep.
Well, how have you evaluated the auditor before?
It was the county administrator solicited, just received some general feedback from the committee members, and then.
Okay, you said, okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Yeah, that's okay. And then I just continued what Tom had done with Dave and completed it. And we just thought, as we really recognize the independence of the internal auditor,
I think there's kind of two questions within that. So who will be the one to seek and then receive and pull together that information? HR can do that, absolutely. If that's what the committee would like. And then the second piece is what audience are we seeking that feedback from? So I think you mentioned in the past that practice had been just to the committee. I think that there was some discussion about should it be to all of the department heads and elected officials, or is it this year, this committee, and then next year we'll evaluate if we should expand it. That's two options there.
I think since you have like the end of July, it should be maybe just this committee, and then next year maybe expand to department heads that had an audit. You hadn't had an audit, probably like she's fine. Yeah. We let her. Didn't go. It's amazing.
Yeah, she's doing a great job. Don't come here. No.
Okay.
Okay, so this year, this committee, that's what the feedback I heard is that seem.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, time of dissenting.
Yeah, she got July.
Yeah, it's not that much time.
Makes sense.
And HR can seek that. And then in terms of once the final document is completed, I think there's some discussion about bringing it back around then and delivering that feedback to the internal auditor. So is that something that would like to bring back to the full committee during an executive session. And then if so, we were talking about when's the next meeting? Do we need to have a special meeting? Or should it just be completed within the subcommittee this year?
Well, I think it'd be the full committee at that, or the full audit committee at that point.
That's fair, and everyone want to have a part of that process, I would think. At the end.
So would that mean scheduling a special meeting in July, because we weren't planning July?
I think it would, yeah, me.
Plus informative.
Only if you want to get your calendar. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, people's schedules are in July.
Yeah.
I'm mostly here, so it's okay, but I am gone 25th through the 31st. The mountains, out of touch.
Oh, take your satellite with you.
I don't have one.
I don't think we.
Oh, I gotcha.
Do we need to have a quorum? Is this a decision that like an official vote, or is it just?
I think that's a good question. So I think that there has to be, you know, in terms of if the subcommittee takes the feedback and makes the determination, I'm looking at our current form, which is in the packet, you know, determining what we call the overall performance rating. That's the one that's actually really necessary for our systems. We would need to know if the subcommittee makes that, and that's a recommendation, and then the full committee adopts it. If that's the case, I think then a quorum would need to occur to make that, and then come out of executive session to provide direction to staff to go and do that, right? So, quorum, yes.
And I think even if July is a hard time to have a meeting, if the subcommittee, if the work's done and everyone on the committee has had an opportunity to provide feedback, then the quorum, I think, would have, even if you have 5 people for that meeting, they'd have the information and feedback from the full committee to be able to make a decision.
We just need to make sure to get 5.
Yeah. Which I think we do. I think we pull that.
Yeah.
Well, especially if we
should.
Yeah, I was gonna say, especially with Zoom.
Definitely Zoom too.
Yeah. That's true.
not the camps on Friday usually.
Is everybody okay with using this form that was in our materials, filling that out? We could circulate that electronically and have it sent to, I have it sent to Kathleen and the committee members. So I'm just trying to get the ball rolling here. It seems like, you know, we're going to have to set the meeting where we're going to present the present Elizabeth's evaluation probably today, figure out when that's going to be. But if we could all have our homework, we could get started on now, and maybe with an agreed deadline as to when that could go back to the 3 members of the subcommittee and Kathleen.
So I think there might be 2 meetings. One is the official meeting where there's quorum to deliver it, and then a subcommittee meeting to go over the feedback and create the evaluation.
No, I was thinking. Oh. Well, that's the way it should work if we had more time. But what I was thinking for the first year is that it would be delegated to the subcommittee to come up with just the meets or exceeds expectations or doesn't meet expectations. That's what you need, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding, the electronic version of the evaluation form to all members for feedback to
and checking the box about overall.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that information comes to human resources, and we will put it together and present that then to the subcommittee.
Yeah,
to
that's
make.
it. I'm just trying to figure out how to not have a meeting. Until we're actually presenting the evaluation.
I wonder, I mean, is it a meeting before? Then that's kind of tight, but it could be before and then the
Maybe
meeting
it should just be the full committee.
this year.
Yeah. Just do it all one time.
Or would it be possible for just like a 30-minute check-in for the subcommittee? Just to have a quick discussion.
Or it could be
finalizing the recommendation.
It could be like an hour-long meeting, and the first half hour, I'm not there, you talk. And then the second half hour, I come in, you talk to me, and then we make a decision in public. Send it together.
How far ahead do you have to notice the meeting? Is it just a week? Okay.
It's supposed to be. Oh, actually, it's not, because we do our agenda conferences Thursday morning. It gets posted that afternoon and we have Monday meetings. So it's not a whole week. What is it, 72 hours or something, maybe?
California was 72 hours.
Maybe that's what it is.
Is it just target date July 31st or a date before then?
July 30th. Yeah.
Let's not have it on the first day of fair, please.
When are you off the grid, Mr. Chair?
July 25 through the end of the month. So I'm most of July, I'm not good here. Very end.
Do we target Fridays for?
Did you say Fridays?
Well, they're always open because there's no.
But you can bring the children.
Member of the public would be very which is fine.
I like the idea of this year having sort of the two meetings back to back, or at least a section of the meeting. So I think that's how.
That's a better use of time since we're on a short schedule.
So
it makes a lot of sense.
Should we look for the week of the 15th in July?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I'm open.
What day was that?
The 19th.
I have a ribbon cutting for Rooted Homes at noon on Friday the 19th.
Elizabeth, think we'll have.
And sisters.
Go official. What do you know what date?
July 1.
Yeah.
Oh, that week. I have a lot of openness, but especially around the noon time, the week of the 15th, so many days.
Yeah, my July is. I'm gonna have to be zooming whatever date you choose, if it's a Friday.
People like meeting around lunch, or Friday can't meet on the 19th around lunch.
I can. I have 2 commitments at 12.
All right.
Yeah. Just how we'll see how later we're boss, right?
Yeah.
Where am I supposed to be?
Or Thursday the 18th, or Friday morning.
Friday morning works.
Yeah.
It's better than Friday at 3.
With
To have
Thursday
another
the
meeting after
18th
this one.
work for people.
It's better for me than the 19th.
The 19th for me is impossible. Thursday the 18th of July.
Works for me.
9 o'clock.
No.
No, I've got a dental appointment, but I can.
Oh, the sadist.
The 18th.
I call it the sadist.
I don't want to go to the meeting I have scheduled, so I like that.
So it's definitely.
Yeah.
So at 9 AM, go to the subcommittee and then.
Yeah, I'm not on the sub, so that works out fine.
So.
Well, 9 to 10.
I think.
Okay, is it?
Well, it's like switching 2 hours just in case.
What we're gonna do on the 18th is first we'll have a meeting of the of the audit committee, because we've already received the evaluations filled out by everybody. So it won't be a meeting of the subcommittee, right? Or maybe the audit committee, or if you're program, a meeting of the subcommittee.
I think it's the subcommittee, because you'll be receiving the feedback from the full audit committee.
It could be the whole audit committee though, too, because now we will have noticed it as a public meeting, so.
Yeah.
Could they just, is there a benefit in that? Because I think the goal of that first piece is to draft the evaluation.
The only benefit is to get it all done that morning.
So I think that that would come after the subcommittee. So subcommittee would meet to receive all the feedback from the full committee. Are you saying that the committee would do the work at the meeting?
Quick suggestion, could the subcommittee have a 9 o'clock scheduled meeting and the full audit committee be noticed for 10 o'clock or 9 and 9:30, or so that the subcommittee, we all agree there'll be a non-public subcommittee meeting at a particular time, say 9 o'clock, and then at 10 o'clock is the full public. And we go into e-session and then back out and it's complete. And that way, Judge, that would all be completed in one meeting. It would just be a pre-meeting, so to speak.
Is it at that meeting that we'll be getting like the 9 evaluations that were completed by all the members, or will we have them before that?
Thinking that can be distributed ahead of time, right? We could also pick a target date 2 weeks prior to that for the full committee to provide feedback based on whatever format HR provides for soliciting the feedback. And then you guys have a chance, the subcommittee can have a week or two to evaluate it, time to discuss prior to the full public meeting, and then public meeting e-session completed.
So that's 2 meetings in July?
Well, all on one day, just
Okay.
one subcommittee,
2 hours.
say 9 o'clock,
2 hour
whatever amount of time you think you need to, if it's a half hour or an hour, and then full public meeting.
And then we'll set up so the subcommittees will meet 9:30 or 10, and then we'll notice the full public meeting at 10.
Sounds good.
Okay, what if the subcommittee meets at 9? And then we start the full meeting at 9:30. Now,
Subcommittee can kind of meet whenever they want, right?
Yeah. Let's just have the full, my suggestion, let's have the full committee meet at 9. With the idea being that the evaluations will be returned to the subcommittee through Kathleen, at least a week before that day. And the subcommittee will figure out a way to get together, probably by Zoom or something like that, to go over what they've got and create a recommendation for to present to the full committee about a summation of what the information we received from the forms. And then we'll just and we can't even distribute that to the rest of the committee though, can we, for the meeting?
You can. They just can't make a.
They just can't make a decision.
They just can't discuss it. Just the same way we send you a report.
And it can be marked confidential.
Okay.
I think one of the concerns was in terms of finding another date or time for subcommittee. So that was why there was consideration of putting it all on the 18th.
But maybe the subcommittee could just decide among the 3 of you the way to.
Yeah. Okay, that might be better. We can do it. I'll just need to know so I can get you the information before you meet.
We'll need your help. Well, I imagine we may need your help or somebody's help at the county setting up the Zoom for the subcommittee.
We're good at that.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea in case. Might make it easier to coordinate that meeting. Then you have to get together physically. It might be a little harder to do.
Yeah, I agree.
So how's this? Kathleen is going to get us all this evaluation form that everybody will populate and return to Kathleen. She'll distribute it to the committee members. The committee members will then figure out when they're going to meet and create a recommendation about what to do with it. And then we'll start off. And then we'll distribute that recommendation to the committee members. Not to Elizabeth or Aaron. And then I think we'll just kind of go from there. I mean, the idea would be, unless anybody wants to do something different, we'll just finish up whatever we need to do, and starting at 9 o'clock on the 18th.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that should work.
If I sent out the evaluations now, would a July 1 return date be doable?
Yes.
For the rest of the committee, I think that's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'll be in Utah that whole time, so I think that should work. Well, okay, good.
No, just tell us how we can.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you want me to drive him over to you?
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
We can handle
part of
it.
Utah, will you be in?
I'll be,
I'll there.
depending on the day.
I could be in
somewhere
Deer
between
Valley?
Zion and Arches.
I'll find you. I'll find you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're just gonna have to press it and have hard
All
discussions.
Well, and I think that's
Places.
otherwise run it over July, and then
Yeah.
that whole week is almost shot anyway, so it's better just to get it done before that long
Yeah.
holiday weekend hits. Otherwise, it's gonna slide to the second one.
Yeah, real fast.
Yeah.
It's one of the most
Okay.
decisive committees I've been in front of. This is fantastic work. On a Friday afternoon.
Thank you.
Maybe that's the key.
Yeah.
So, let me throw one over the wrinkle in this. In the past, Nick has also reached out to me for my input on the evaluation. Does the committee find any value in that, or do you want me to continue that practice, or is it just the committee members?
I'm always in favor of more information rather than less, so it's fine with me.
So who evaluates you?
Elizabeth.
Okay.
After she sees his evaluation.
She proves mine, and that's how.
Let's be transparent now.
Not a message.
Right, the input was completely uniform except for one outlier.
Yeah.
So it's like.
Could not come to a consensus.
We're all below.
So now I have a deadline too. Okay, see how I just gave myself homework.
Oh, Jody, you're at Best Care now.
Yes.
I talked to Rick the other day. I got the great word that 1 overdose death this year today. That is amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. He said he can't figure out why, but. No, we had 26 overdose deaths last year at Best Care, and historically they'd only had 1 a year before. And then they had 3 in 1 week. It was terrible.
Batches. Yeah.
So 1 today this year. Amazing. Yeah. Is this real wood? Fine, real wood. This looks
Better than my head.
Oh,
The other wood
there's
that
one
I
behind
know.
you. It looks more real grainy back there. Maybe the
Anything else on
doors.
this?
I have work to do,
We have
so
work to do,
Go do that.
Work to do.
thank you.
And, okay.
Yeah.
Is that really gonna create some? I don't
Here's
want
another where we at on our.
to just shoving stuff onto you.
Oh, no.
It's not a lot
Oh,
to do,
Thank you for the great.
I have another meeting.
Yeah. That was been.
but my assumption was you could just press a button.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
That's all they do over there anyway.
Yeah.
You know that.
I kind of started it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so that's item number 6.
yeah, let's 6 is.
6A.
6A.
Sorry to put us out of order, but I just wanted to.
Whatever, yeah, I mean, we'll get to it, so, yes, okay, go ahead.
Because I wanted to move on to the audit committee survey, because we have been trying to have this conversation for a few meetings now.
Yeah.
So I guess it was it was after the September meeting. You all filled out a survey and about the operations of the audit committee. The intent was that after we completed the survey, we would it was a self-evaluation survey. We would decide if we wanted to change anything with the audit committee. So I just thought we could have that conversation here, just since it's been a while, go through a little bit of what it's said. And then one of the things we could possibly discuss, and Kathleen sort of started mentioning this, was whether we wanted to adopt more formal bylaws and processes. And another thing we talked about was going to moving from quarterly meetings to every other month. So it's one. So the first slide is just why did we survey the audit committee members? And we did so hopefully that make the experience of being on the more meaningful and improve committee effectiveness. And so there were 46 questions on the survey. They were related to processes and procedures for the committee, how the committee understands risks, the composition and quality of the committee, how the committee communicates amongst itself and how it communicates with staff, how the committee performs oversight of financial reporting, and then also oversight of the audit function. And so these were the scores. There was on a scale of 1 to 5. All the scores are, you know, above the middle, so it looks pretty good. But this just shows you how they related to each other. The answers on processes and procedures were the highest, and answers on audit oversight were the lowest. And so I thought we should just take some time considering those scores to think about, is there anything that the committee wants to propose changing? Is there anything you'd like to propose to Aaron and I to change so that we could get more information to you, more effective information to you? Is there anything you'd like to change about your own processes? This is just to kind of remember what those questions were, because it's been a while. So, and then it also shows how the scores have changed over time. So when this was first done, I think it was way back in like 2012, this section had an average score of 3.74. Now it has a score of 4.18. But this was, you know, that the committee reports to the Board of Commissioners, that the committee members dedicate sufficient time and resources, that there's a calendar, that there's open dialogue during the meeting, that the meeting materials are appropriate. Understanding risks had to do with how well you are getting information about risks from the county. So are you hearing from staff the risks that could impact the quality of the financial statements, or just generally more risks to the county, including how the county identifies risks? The next area is related to the composition and quality of the committee members. Do you like how committee members are selected? Do you think committee members have the right qualifications? Do you feel like the committee members—
Phil's probably going to complain, don't you think?
Are the committee members independent? Do you get the right amount of continuing education? Are you getting the right amount of training? Are there succession plans for when committee members roll off? Communication, let's see, this one I don't, the question was really just what is the committee sets the tone at the top. And there wasn't a lot more detail in the question, so that maybe that one means whatever it means to anyone. So maybe if anyone wants to talk about that, talk about why. But I think this is really about the committee setting a good tone for communication. So setting an open tone for communication amongst committee members. That you're getting timely information, that you're made aware of violations or things you need to be aware of, that you visit locations and understand the different operations of the county. Oversight of the financial reporting has to do with the work that Jana and Robert do to produce the financial statements. And also, yeah, that's what this is. So, yeah, are you getting to consider the quality of the financial statements? Are you consulted when management seeks a second opinion on their financial audits? Do you review and understand the county's financial or accounting procedures? Do you understand what management is planning to do in order to address any financial risks? Are you assuring there's resolution of recommendations related to financial reporting? And then also oversight of the audit function. So do you understand the coordination between external and internal audit? Do you review the audit budgets, staffing of audit, how audit assesses compliance and effectiveness? Are you involved in selection of the external auditor? Do you consider non-audit services when thinking about external auditor independence? You understand the fees paid to the external auditor.
These are all at 2012 to present.
Yep.
Graph.
All the same. Those are my slides. But so this is just an opportunity for you all to discuss. I think if there's any changes or suggestions you have for us or anything to change about the committee.
Well, what I thought was interesting about what Wells Fargo had on the news, I mean, I don't think it was very many people, but are you as internal auditors looking at any kind of analysis for people that actually work from home? And if they're actually doing the work, is that the responsibility of their supervisor to ensure that they're actually working?
Yeah, that would be the responsibility of their supervisor. If that was something you were concerned as a risk to the county as a whole, we could potentially put that on the audit plan, and then we could look into that.
Well, you look at the Wall Street on a lot of things, a lot of heavy duty people have said they really want people back in the office more than the people want to come back to the office. There must be a reason why, besides the commute time, right?
There's also the multiple jobs thing, like they have multiple remote jobs.
Right.
And no employer knows it.
Yeah.
I will put that on the list for when we consider it.
I mean, it was just, when I went to the bank today, they had not heard the news. And I go, well, I'm glad you guys are all here working.
That might be optional at Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
A little harder to test. There's invasion if you want to. Keystroke finding is actually very invasive. Because you take huge steps to monitor this sort of search for them. That's a little bit harder.
It's interesting.
Yeah, holistically, you could look at the whole like remote work, right, of workstations. Is it adequate? Is it set up? Is there tracking of, you know, the IT devices that are assigned to individuals, network security? I mean, just kind of policy around remote work, who qualifies, you know.
But I think also, I mean, I think really is the work getting done is also a question. And I haven't heard concerns that work isn't getting done. I actually don't even know how pervasive the work from home is here. So.
That's what I thought was great about what Amanda said. It's more about the deliverables. Like, are you still getting your work done? Are you still able to churn out the expectation? Are you meeting expectation with what you're required to do your work product, right? I think that's also an important measurable in addition to like keystrokes, because
it really
we have quite a few, you know, exec level staff. So
it's really hard for anyone to evaluate that other than the direct supervisor and the staff.
Exactly.
No one else really knows.
I mean, I've been doing like whistleblower investigations. Like if it's an exempt staff and the supervisor is happy with their performance, it's really hard to nail down whether or not
The supervisor's expectations, I think, get affected and tempered by what they see the employee doing, what the employee says, ooh, I can't handle that. And then it may be that you don't have eyes on them and that they are working half time, but are letting the supervisor believe that it's sort of full capacity.
But
that's all.
That supervisor has a lot more information about it than an auditor does. All right.
It is a hard perception. I've seen someone sit at a desk and stare at a contract for 4 hours and have someone sit at home and can read in a half hour. And also, it can vary greatly.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's the flip side too, you know, someone that's not driving 45 minutes each way, they have an extra hour and a half to work.
Yeah, but there's a lot of subjectivity and effectiveness. Some of your staff are more efficient than others. Yeah, purely. So that'd be interesting on it. But I mean, I didn't have anything that would be like lazy that we'd have to change. I think sometimes depending on how much audit activity there is, the frequency of the meeting might help. I think the last one we just ran out of time because there was too much.
Well, I think we're gonna have run into the same problem today.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we have just a lot of.
Yeah, I think their
issues to
frequency,
get through.
that was the only concern I had.
And at times it can be, you know, hard, like you missed one meeting, right, and all of a sudden it's been 6 months since you've been to an audit committee meeting. So if we just move it up to every other month, you don't feel quite so far behind, you know, it's only been a few months and not.
Yeah, it's interesting that the curves, they're all lower at the beginning, higher in the middle, and kind of in the middle and at the end. They all kind of look the same.
Yeah, they do.
It's
I do think that somewhat just people's general attitudes impact the curves. Like I think that after COVID, I think people are just generally less satisfied than they were before.
Every survey we've done, every survey. Less.
And there are some things that have never occurred, i.e. getting second opinions from management based on, you know, negative information from external auditors has never happened. So during my tenure, right? So it's kind of not applicable at this point.
Right.
But I think our county average of years here has really not varied too much from pre-COVID to today. I think maybe we're at 8 or 9, and I think we're still like at 8 in there. So that's still pretty amazing.
For tenure.
Yeah, for the tenure, yeah. And people now actually seem like are going back to work.
Yeah. So is there any interest in like putting together some bylaws? There's a little more structure to the committee, or? I was thinking, especially if the committee is gonna, you know, have these processes in place about like evaluating the internal auditor, that maybe it's time to get a little more formal.
I think structure's fine. It's helps us.
Will you write them for us? And then we'll look at them and change them.
Yeah, or nay, or develop something else based on what we get.
I mean, I'm sure there are lots of boilerplate bylaws.
Yeah.
There's plenty of places to steal from.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Let's steal some and then we can clean them up.
That's something you all would like to see on a future agenda?
So, but should we start getting subcommittees or things, you know, how the subcommittee appointed, what's its role?
Yeah, we can probably get you some language to talk about them.
I think it's really good that we're actually having you evaluated by this group, because this is the way it should be. Yeah,
I think it's a good change.
Yeah, it's positive.
One thing that I did think about though is that if you're evaluating me, then Aaron and I probably shouldn't be involved in the committee member selection process, which we have been. So
now let's look at the bylaws. Let's see what others are doing.
Yeah,
because they'll have that in there. It is a thought. Yeah.
Okay, and then just to get confirmation that you'd like to move to every other month and quarterly. There needs to be a formal motion, or
yeah. Does anyone have any problems with it? Why don't we let's, because we're changing something. Need a vote on it. First we'll make a motion to change our meetings from quarterly to every other month, bi-monthly.
Yeah, it's called bi-monthly, right?
So
yes,
we'll make a motion to do that.
I'll move to change the frequency of meetings from quarterly to bi-monthly.
Okay.
One thing is, I don't know if we've talked about the impact of staff in terms of the additional meetings, so I'm not sure if that's been vetted.
Chatted with Brenda at all about. No, we haven't chatted with Angie and Brenda about it. Okay.
We may want to do that, and it could be. It may be that what it looks like may look different, and or perhaps relying on audit staff to help sort of capture motions and meeting minutes if there's a capacity issue with that change, because but we can check it.
Okay.
I could change my motion to, I move that the audit team explore the possibility and logistics of moving.
I think we need to move. I mean, my opinion is I think we need to, and if it means Aaron and I have to, do the minutes.
Do the administrative functions. I'd gladly take that over to have be able to get through a meeting, the full agenda of a meeting at this point in time. And then we can always roll that back as well.
Any other worries that you guys had as far as time?
I just think the dialogue's important. So I would just encourage the discussion first.
But we're already having a meeting next month, so we could have this be the only other agenda. It would be pretty simple to. The only other agenda item for that meeting would be to revisit. Changing the structure.
Okay.
Because then our next scheduled meeting is that September or October?
August, well, it would be August.
It's scheduled for August.
So we could put that on August just to leave the valuation simple.
So.
Well, I mean, we haven't officially decided to meet in August. That's sort of awkward about the.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But I think we just proposed it was a good one. I think that's stay. We can do it at the second meeting where you do the performance evaluation. You can ask that to the appointee.
Make a formal decision, so I'll withdraw.
Okay. Let's do over there. Okay. Right.
We also need to get through the code briefing because that is something we need to do every year. Last year, I think there were some big updates to the code.
2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Maybe it's every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years. We need
Yeah.
to review code.
Yeah.
This year, we don't have anything to propose, but I did want to discuss anyway. So first of all, I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of what's in the code. The first section just describes the office of the county internal auditor. Section 10 talks about appointment and dismissal of the county auditor. 20 is the qualifications. 25 discusses independence. 30 discusses the authority and scope of audits. 40, the audit schedule. 50, how it's funded, which is through the Board of County Commissioners. 60 is the access that auditors have to staff, documents, and facilities. 70 is about how we report and retain records. 80 says that we can hire contract auditors, consultants, and experts. And 90 talks about our quality assurance review, which is processes we have in place to make sure that our audits are meeting audit standards. So this year, I'm not proposing any changes, but if any of you have changes you want to propose, definitely should. But in the future, there were a couple of things that Aaron and I were thinking would be good to include in this. One is to add reference to the whistleblower hotline. There's a county policy that tasks us with operating the whistleblower hotline, and then that would be if there are any complaints about fraud, waste, and abuse, we would investigate and report to the Board of County Commissioners on the results of that. The whistleblower hotline can also be used for other kinds of complaints, risk management or HIPAA, or complaints about harassment or discrimination. Those we don't investigate, we just pass this on. And we have policies and procedures manual that outlines how we do all of those things, but there's no authority in code for us to do that. So I would propose adding something related to the whistleblower hotline to section 30 of that code. And then there's a link in the documents that are attached to the meeting to the city of Austin, Texas, which has a pretty extensive description of how their hotline works within their audit code. Another thing which we thought might be helpful to have in code is something about management response and how how quickly that management should respond to audits. There is a policy that outlines management response, but we thought it would be good to have that in code as well. And then the last thing is just mostly a language issue, but the auditing standards are changing from the term quality assurance to quality management. So that would be just a little cleanup. I guess the idea is that you never can assure something is quality, but you can manage quality.
It makes them feel like they've done something. They are changing terms.
But is that for clarification, the timeline for management response, is that a timeline on when they implement audit recommendations, or could you just elaborate on what that means?
Sure, that would be a response to recommendations. So their response to the audit saying, yes, we will do this, or no, we will not, when they actually will implement them.
I think that would actually be good in the code. When I was internal, they had a timeline of when they had to respond by.
And we have that in policy, but
yeah, it was our code. So it's much,
Just
it's a little.
adding it to the code, it's already one place, just putting it together. It's already in the policy, so it's already there, essentially, it's just not in the code.
Right.
Okay.
And so you wouldn't get to make the board of commissioners would change the code, but the audit committee would recommend changes to the board of commissioners.
And then with the whistleblower hotline reference, would that be next year?
Well, I mean, it really can happen whenever you want to. We have a requirement to review the code every 2 years. So that's what we're doing now. There's no timeline for when you can propose changes.
Has there been an issue with the policy for response time not being followed?
No, it's just something that I think is in other, it's something that other audit shops rely on in code, and also yeah, I think that's why and it also just sort of elevates the importance of that.
That makes sense. Makes sense.
Okay. So so I was thinking that maybe something like that might be a subcommittee role to come up with changes to.
Okay.
I think that's all we need to do. We wanted to go back to follow up.
All right, let's do that.
You'll start because mine's just dead.
Mine's almost dead too.
You want to just wait for the next one then?
Yeah.
Wait for the next meeting?
Yeah, we could combine the follow-ups.
Yeah, we just have the continuity of operations plan follow-up, so we can defer that to the next meeting.
Yeah, maybe we should just go to administration update.
Yeah, Eric's here. Yeah, I just want to give one update from budget committee. The budget committee the board approved. The board, I don't know, but yeah. There's a different tenor in terms of looking at the budget. For years, the county had additional general fund revenue, and we've been able to put that aside for capital expenses and future capital expenses. We've had some long-term financing done, projections done by our finance team, and that shows that things are changing at the county. And in the next year or so, even though our general fund revenues continue to grow, our expenditures are outpacing those revenues. So we're just facing a very different budget situation at the county moving forward. So that was probably the main theme from the budget committee.
Not really surprising, I guess. It's probably a lot of organizations are seeing the same thing. Like the Parks District. Yeah. Thank you for that. All right. What else do we have that we need?
Maybe we should do the internal audit work plan.
Get the work plan, yeah, that's probably the next one. Okay, let's do that.
No, we didn't talk about the health benefits fund, but remember it had a paragraph in our prior year's financials. And I think we only improved like 1.4 million from the expenses for medical went up 29%. 29% because we're self-insured. I mean, incredible.
Well, actually, so that update is because those are the audits we have in process. So, yeah, that was the only update is right now we're like Dave said, we're wrapping up the integrated audit of county legal. Aaron's working on a pre-construction audit of the courthouse renovation, which is a pretty big project. I'm working on a health benefits audit, so I should have more to share with you about that next couple months.
Yeah.
Maybe not next time, but maybe especially if we go to every other month. And then Aaron's just kicked off another integrated audit of the recreational vehicle park here in Expo Center.
Okay.
So you kind of took
the vehicle park at the fairgrounds?
The RV park at the fairgrounds, yeah.
Yes, how to get that full?
How to get that full?
Well, the RV park is not, it's not full that often. Because we have competition in Redmond with they have different rules. So they've been very successful.
Like different rules in what way?
People can stay there longer at the other spot. My husband plays golf for Juniper, so he always sees it. So if you want an audit report from him, it's like, we need more people there. It's great revenue.
So, yeah. Or yeah, so what we've done so far, we've had a big year. These are the reports that we have put out in the past year. So we've conducted 9 audits in the past 12 months. Last year, we had conducted 7 audits in 12 months. Doing better. These are the audits we have in progress, which I just mentioned. And then these are the audits that are left on our list. We have a 2-year work plan. So we have 13 audits to do in the next 12 months, which is a lot. Last time we had 16 audits to do in the next 12 months, and we didn't get through all of those. So wanted to talk to you about proposing some changes. So Aaron and I talked about a couple that we might want to propose taking off. The first was the personnel data entry audit. This was an audit that was proposed by Human Resources based on the fact that they had some very manual processes for entering data into some kinds of data into their system. A reason to not do this is that they are actually looking to purchase new software. So we were thinking it might not make a whole lot of sense to audit it at this point if things are going to change a lot. We also, my battery's running low. We also are proposing to remove the 2024 County Food and Beverage audit. The reason to do this is we are wearing out Fair and Expo. We have pretty much been constantly auditing them all year, and they are getting tired of it. So
tired of you, tired of us.
Oh, and I can understand. We have a fair alcohol,
and we still have another fair alcohol.
We have a fair alcohol that we still have to put it off after the fair.
They have got to sell not alcohol. I mean, when you go there and you try and drink just like regular, it's very hard to find non-alcoholic drinks. I know it.
I'm shocked that they're allowed to walk around with alcohol beverages and all over the fairgrounds.
Oh yeah.
Somewhere along the lines the law changed. I don't know when, but it always good Eric.
I know part of the explanation is they used to do a beer garden, and then when you put people in one area and they're drinking, the more apt to fight.
Okay.
And if people are and drink more,
so
people are spread out, then that helps alleviate those issues. So I remember that as an explanation from. I don't remember if it was here, Dan.
I don't know. I haven't been in a couple of years, but I just remember the last time I was there, it was just like every place, every concession stand had some kind of alcohol sales as well. So.
Well, last year the lines were extremely long, so I think that helped limit the amount of slow.
You had to wait.
Yes.
buy your beer and then get
Well,
back
I
in
was,
line.
in all reality, they were very long, so, it had to limit it just because of the availability.
That sounds some sort of counterintuitive. There's no one is drinking because the lines are too long to. Maybe they're not, but if they're serving people real fast, and the lines are still long, then there's probably more people.
Yeah.
Well,
It's harder to drink 10 beers.
Yeah.
I just wish they would offer more non-alcoholic. I think that would probably really be helpful when you're trying not to drink.
I don't have the biker convention there again. That was covered that.
It does sound like there's still a lot of interest in Fair and Expo here, but.
Yeah, this committee, not food and beverage though.
Okay. The last one we're proposing removing was an audit titled Selected Computerized Procedures. That was kind of a placeholder for anything interesting that I think David would want to look at, given that we have so many, sorry, my computer just went dead.
Wow.
Given that we have so many projects already, maybe that one is one we can take off. There's a couple though that we need to add. One is the sheriff is going to be transitioning at the end of the year because he's not running for re-election. So we'll have to add a transition audit for that. And then we're proposing adding a not landfill integrated audit, just because we sort of redid the schedule for integrated audits when we changed what we were looking at, and by incorporating more departments that maybe weren't cash heavy but had other risks, we needed to do one more. So not landfill was on that list.
So it goes from 13 to 12.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there'll be some carryover. There is every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just like, why not just take away those three, maybe add the transition, and
we could do that too.
It just realistically,
yeah,
it sounds like.
And I have a teeny audit for you. Fire free, we tripled the number of days, and then somehow that untripling was removed. And so I actually asked today how many tons were taken to our landfill, because I want to see what happened. Because the first year of COVID, you remember everyone was going to the transfer station. That was an outing, and they were, it was all over Facebook, and it was a really big deal. But what has happened now? Because people really do need to use it to clean up around their place. So I'm sure it's just a teeny little audit. I mean, I'll probably have the answer Monday or Tuesday, but like, did it go back down like to a quarter of what we were doing? And I have a feeling it might have.
I was curious too. I mean, it made also super low.
Oh, I was trying to get in.
On the not landfill, have you discussed with Tim Brunel about that whole audit?
We haven't, because it's not.
Okay.
It's not approved.
Before the audit committee votes on that, I would encourage a discussion with them first.
Okay.
Jody, what were you saying?
To piggyback on when you said like the not landfill, was that just not like that's not Negus?
Yeah, because we're trying
opening and stuff
trying to do
right, and if that changes anything there.
One of the things we wanted to do is divide up some of the larger departments, so that's why that one was.
Yeah, especially going to this integrated audit where it's more broad survey level. We even we had health services cash handling kind of on the plan here, and we're starting to kind of parse that up too, because it's like the sheriff's office big. It's just massive.
Yeah.
And so parsing those up and even parsing up solid waste into like its subunits, just gives us the more flexibility and the capability to churn through these faster. So that was the top process.
To do my job at Fire Free, I made a lot of trips.
Fabulous.
Let me tell you.
Well, I always go, and I always, because, you know, like when I first did it, I remember going and they had people that took it out. You couldn't even do the work. It was like a whole experience. And now, yeah, and now it's not like that, but I still love it. So you made up for it. Good. So the numbers could be really high. I gotta go find out where my $1 million is for the wells. So I'm hoping this lady's gonna answer her phone on Friday, right? She's not answering her texts, so.
So we need to decide if we're going to change the work plan at all. And so our proposal was to add a remove personnel data entry county fair food and beverage, and remove select computerized procedures and add sheriff's office and not. It sounds like there were some other ideas from the committee. Is anyone want to make a motion?
The ones, but I think adding not, if there's already a potential capacity issue, I think it may make more sense just to not add the not landfill one. Especially with the sheriff's office, you know, that's a major undertaking, with that transition. Rather than going from 13 to 12, go from 13 to 11 and make it more manageable.
Or do that later, to the landfill later date. That's fine. That gives you flexibility to do other things.
Yeah.
Keep more time.
Easier for us.
Okay. So that's motion, we with that form of motion and do that, or
I will make that in the form of a motion.
second. Okay, so have a second. All those in favor say aye. 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 Oppose. Motion carries. That's the direction. Thank you. Okay. We made it to 3 o'clock. 3:01. Do we have left? Is there anything that needs to be done?
I don't think we need anything else to be done. There's more information in
Yeah,
your
we have
packet.
more information.
A lot.
Right, so why don't we, we don't really need a motion to adjourn.
No,
adjourn.
just adjourn.
We'll just adjourn at 3:01. All right. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for lunch.